Hi everyone, and welcome to the web meeting of the Renewable Thermal Alliance, the RTA, which today is dedicated to the projects awarded the RTA Seed Innovation Grant for 2018. My name is Helle Gronli, and I am affiliated with the Yale Center for Business and Environment, and I'm also the coordinator of the RTA. The RTA was initiated by the Connecticut Green Bank, NYSERDA, and Yale University in 2016 to catalyze and scale a regional market for renewable heating and cooling. It is a multi-state network of market participants which has grown to near 300 individuals from a broad spectrum of stakeholders. In 2018, the RTA introduced the RTA Seed Innovation Grant, which was made possible with the support of NYSERDA and the Connecticut Green Bank. The goal of this grant is to advance the vision and mission of the RTA by supporting innovations that can scale a regional market for renewable heating and cooling. We received 8 applications this year and selected 4 projects for a $20,000 grant each. At today's RTA web meeting, awardees of the RTA Seed Innovation Grant will present their projects. But before that, and before introducing today's speakers, I will provide a few practical details. You were muted upon entry and have to unmute yourself for questions and comments. Alternatively, you could submit comments and questions through the chat function. The icon for unmuting yourself can be found in the lower left-hand corner of the Zoom window. This presentation is recorded and will be posted on YouTube and Basecamp afterwards. Each speaker will present for a maximum of 10 minutes. We have 4 projects presenting, so we just have to have a tight schedule. And after each presentation, we will allow for a few questions and comments from the audience, depending on the time available. The projects will be presented in the following order. First, Val Story, who is a project director at the Clean Energy States Alliance, will introduce the project Carbon Cost Calculator. Second, Duane Rouiller, director of the UMass Clean Energy Extension, will present their idea of establishing a comparative evaluation tool for renewable thermal market penetration. Third, Nikhil Nadkarni, energy planner at the City of Cambridge, and Megan Shaw, Outreach Director for the Cambridge Energy Alliance, will present their project Clean Heating and Cooling Platform. And last but not least, Matt Davis, Associate Professor at the University of New Hampshire, will give us an overview of the project OTherm Performance Data Clearinghouse. I will now stop sharing my screen, and Val Story, you are welcome to share your screen and start presenting the carbon cost calculator.
Great, thanks, Helen. Let me just take a second to share my screen. All right. Does that look good to you?
Looks great.
All right, great. Thank you. Thanks so much to Helle and the Yale team for awarding CISA this grant opportunity. We're very excited. Yes, as Helle mentioned, we applied for and will be developing a cost carbon calculator for renewable heating and cooling technologies, and I will go ahead and explain what that is over the next few minutes. First, I wanted to give a little bit of background on who the Clean Energy States Alliance is. We are a national nonprofit organization. We're based out of Montpelier, Vermont, and we work with state energy agencies across the U.S. to advance clean energy, both policy, technology, and finance, all those 3 things. The membership, CISA's membership is displayed currently on your screen, and we've been working on renewable heating and cooling policy and market strategies for about 5 or 6 years, and mainly we work through our state members to share information on the latest and greatest on renewable heating and cooling programs, on technology performance and market barriers and opportunities. We've published some renewable heating and cooling reports, including an overview of thermal inclusion in state renewable portfolios standards and the impact of thermal storage biomass pellet boiler efficiently. We are currently working to support states' renewable heating and cooling strategies with a consumer guidebook to renewable heating and cooling. And we are also working on a series of case studies on heat smart and thermalized campaigns from across the US. So that's a little bit of what we've been doing in the renewable heating and cooling space. As I said, we work with state clean energy agencies across the US. And for this project, we are working with 4 states in the Northeast who are either have renewable heating and cooling work plans, strategies, or some renewable heating and cooling goal as part of their green target. In particular, we are working with New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and working with CISA members in these states on regional strategies, particularly to support heat smart and thermalized campaigns. And as part of that work, the group identified a cost carbon calculator as a key tool that could advance renewable thermal market adoption. And so this became our #1 priority, and we have luckily received this RTA grant and as well as some other foundation funding to support this project. With the tool, we envision that the tool will be have a web interface, and that it will be a consumer-facing tool. So it will enable consumers directly, so homeowners, small business owners, to compare different renewable heating and cooling technologies and evaluate the costs and the greenhouse gas emission reductions of those technologies against fossil fuel and electric resistance heating system. The tool primarily, we think, is going to first be used in what are known as heat smart or thermalized community campaigns. And those campaigns, if you haven't heard of them before, they are based and built on the very successful and popular solar campaigns, which are outreach strategies that taps into the power of communities to increase consumer awareness and then helps reduce installation costs and often offers a bulk purchase cost to equipment. And so some of our members, particularly New York, NYSERDA, and MassDC, have launched either they're called Heat Smart, or in New York, it's called the New York Clean Heating and Cooling Communities. And these communities are working on these community bulk purchase campaigns. And so the vision is that this cost carbon calculator would first be a helpful tool for these consumers to help them choose what kind of renewable heating and cooling technology would make sense to place in their home. It would also be a tool that installers would be encouraged to use and could approach a homeowner to help them compare the costs and the benefits, the carbon reduction benefits of installing a renewable heating and cooling appliance in their home. The tool will have various inputs and assumptions, and since we're just getting started on this work, we still have yet to figure out how, whether we will have one set of inputs and assumptions across the region, or if we can make the tool different, the inputs and assumptions different for different regions and different states. And so the group will be working together and will be working with one or more consultants to develop the tool. And as I said, the tool is going to calculate the potential cost and greenhouse gas savings associated with installing a renewable heating and cooling technology compared to fossil fuels, particularly oil, propane, and natural gas, and electric resistance heating. And so there will be various inputs and assumptions and analyses that are going to go into this tool. And on the screen in front of you are some of those inputs and assumptions that the group will work on with the consultant to figure out the appropriate inputs and assumptions that will go in. So for example, we'll have to have discussions on the performance characteristics at different temperatures of the different technologies that we want to input into the calculator, how to calculate, for example, a home's peak load and annual load, how we make assumptions about whether the renewable heating and cooling system will be used for whole home heating 100% of the time, if it will be for supplemental heating, how much. So there will have to be certain assumptions made about how the consumer is going to use the actual renewable heating and cooling system. We'll also input fuel costs. We'll take into account fuel escalation rates, emissions data and emissions performance from wood heating appliances will go in there. Weather data, we'll need to figure out how local or how regional the weather inputs can be, the number of heating degree days, and then we will also put in information about incentives, rebates, tax credits, and of course that will vary whether the system will be used for whole home heating or for supplemental heating. So there's still a lot to be worked out, and we're excited to be beginning this process, and we think it will be a helpful tool that the region can use. So there's definitely some cost savings here with the states working together to develop a tool that can be used across state lines instead of each state developing this tool on its own. We expect that this tool, because it will have an easy-to-use web-based interface, which can be, of course, used beyond the clean heating and cooling campaigns, will be accessible to consumers and installers. So anyone will be able to go online, enter some variables like the size of their home, the current heating system they have, how much it costs to currently heat their home, and to help them choose what kind of renewable heating and cooling system might make sense for them to install. So we really see this as a tool that will help accelerate the market adoption of renewable heating and cooling technologies. So that is our proposal and our project in a nutshell. If there are questions, happy to take them afterwards, and my contact info is up on the screen. Thanks, Hele. Let me see, I think I can stop the share and pass it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So while Duane Rouiller shares his screen, we have time for a couple of questions if the audience have some immediate questions for this project.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, this is Bill Nowak from New York Geo. And I wonder if Val has looked at, or if they've started thinking about the effective useful life they're going to give to the various technologies. We've been involved in the process with the New York State Joint Utilities and the Public Service Commission. And what's in the New York State Tech Manual at this point for heat pumps, at least, is a 25-year effective life for geothermal and a 15-year effective life for air source heat pumps. We do think that the geothermal number does not adequately take into account the loop, which is in many cases warranted for 50 years and will probably last a century. But that is kind of the state of the art in New York State for effective useful lives. And I also wanted to let Val know that in recent rate cases, there have been numbers for carbon savings that have been developed that go along with the earning adjustment mechanisms in some of the rate cases. And the Orange and Rockland rate case just filed their joint proposal, and they have some numbers there that I'd be happy to send along to her, and also some of the background information as to how those numbers were arrived at. But is there an effective useful life that's been looked at yet?
Hi, this is Val. Thanks for those comments, and that those numbers would be helpful. We haven't had, that's on our radar, but we haven't had the conversation and yet agreed upon any of the inputs. I know that, yes, we will be, of course, inputting the life of a system, and we are aware that the loop life is different than the heat pump life itself. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to take any information you have. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, both, and then I'll let Duane Rouiller present his project.
Great, thank you, Helle. And let me just confirm, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Super, and you see my screen?
Yeah, they look perfect.
All right, perfect. Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to present today to the participants of RTA, and particularly thank you, Helle and RTA for the grant to move this project forward. Really appreciate it and look forward to the work ahead. So the work that we've been granted to move forward is a tool that has been under development internally, and particularly for some of the communities we work with in Massachusetts, but this will really give us an opportunity to make it more universally applicable, as well as more user-friendly and publicly available through good spreadsheet skills and a interface on the internet. So basically what we are working on is a comparative evaluation tool, really for regional planners and for energy analysts to look at what the future might look like under various market penetrations of renewable thermal technologies, and to compare those futures with regard to which renewable thermal technologies are being advanced. Just to start off, the Clean Energy Extension at the University of Massachusetts is about 2.5, 3 years old. We were established with some startup funds from the Department of Energy Resources in Massachusetts. We work under the umbrella of the other extension programs at the university, which is a land-grant university, the Center for Ag, Food, and the Environment. We have a relatively small staff, but we leverage collaboration with the ample university resources in terms of faculty and students across many disciplines. The tool development is really motivated by work that we've done in the renewable thermal space in portions of Massachusetts, county sort of level portions of the Commonwealth, working with regional planning agencies, and really trying to address the question that a lot of regional planners have with regard to, making commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and working on policies to develop renewable thermal technologies. But again, the renewable thermal technologies range in terms of their attributes, range quite widely with regard to greenhouse gas emissions, energy expenditures, impact on the electric grid, and local economic impact. And the tool is really meant to be helpful to help regional planners, energy analysts to really compare these potential outcomes and help to make good decisions on a community level. Unlike Val's screening tool, this is not a tool that's used for individual projects, but to look at the heating sector as a whole over a number of towns or sort of county level, or potentially even a whole state level. The components of the tool are really twofold. First is really outside the Excel itself model, but is really a GIS, what we have currently, a GIS-based methodology to look at a region and really tally up the heat load across different building sectors in that geographic area. And then a spreadsheet based market planning and outcome model that really looks at the market penetration exogenously input by the user of what the market penetration that wants to be assumed for the region over time, and then an accounting for what does that mean for different technologies for energy, greenhouse gas emissions, economic impacts. Just briefly going through this, the regional heat load tally really looks at parcel level data from GIS and estimates heating load from those various building sectors and aggregates those across these different building sectors to come up with a total heat tally for that geographic region. We currently do this with GIS. We want to make that a little bit more template oriented, so anybody can essentially get through that process. The spreadsheet model really looks at the treatment, first looks at sort of the, well, let me first talk about the treatment of market penetration. The model applies really a user-specified or exogenous market penetration. It's really a model to answer more the question of what-if tool. That is not a prediction of market penetration, but what is the outcome for the region if we go forward with market penetration of so much of different types of renewable thermal technologies into these building sectors. The model currently is, I would say, limited to really two renewable thermal technologies, sort of aggregated together. One is heat pumps. And at this point, and I'll get to what we plan to do to extend the model, but at this point we have the heat pump basically just aggregated into as a single heat type of heat pump with based on a COP, and second is wood heating. Modern wood heating, differentiated though by be it chips, bulked or bagged pellets. And also, at least for the purpose of Massachusetts and greenhouse gas accounting, whether the feedstock is coming from residues or thinnings. This gives sort of a list of the inputs that we take information on. The outputs of the model on the heat pump side is really what is the electric use resulting from the heat pumps. What's the aggregated electric peak aggregated demand? That is an issue that I think regions and states need to be aware of and concerned about with regard to the electrification for all the benefits it does have. It does also have concerns with regard to increased electrical peak demands in that coldest of winter days. Tracks the how much remaining conventional use is used if the heat pumps are not used to fully provide the heating of the buildings, and obviously works calculates greenhouse gas emissions, does take into account a user-specified declining grid carbon intensity. On the wood heating, the model looks at the fuel use to provide the heating for the market penetration of the modern wood heating systems. Looks at what the feedstock demand to feed that heating supply, as well as looks at the greenhouse gas emission dynamics based on the Massachusetts methodology for the debt and dividend of greenhouse gases that we use in Massachusetts. The outputs of the model provide graphically or tabularly, looks at really the, this is just one scenario of a what this looks like in terms of the, if we're penetrating 15% of the market by 2035, and half of that's heat pumps, half of that's wood energy. This is how the model would predict that's distributed across the different building types. But probably more importantly, just for this scenario, nobody's to take home any real results from this, but just as illustrative examples, we're able to use that to then track, okay, what is the annual heating expenditures in terms of dollars per year expended on heating on those different technologies, as well as on the right, then look at the cumulative, in this case, greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. Again, in the way Massachusetts looks at it, the heat pumps have more substantial greenhouse gas savings, particularly as the grid gets greener. Wood energy has more initial emissions, but as the dividends pay off from the decay or regrowth, you get benefits further into the future. Just something to inform communities about as they look to make decisions on how to move forward. In terms of the work that we look to forward to do with the RTA funds in terms of enhancements to the model, we really look to really simplify and standardize this GIS-based regional heat load tally. We'll work on that. We very much look to differentiate the heat pump so we can separate out for planners to look at separate out air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, even water source heat pumps. We do want to add solar thermal as well. At this point, we don't have capital costs associated here, but we want to integrate capital costs so we can project the regional capital spending associated with the renewable thermal technologies. We want to be able to enable users from different states and for different methodologies to treat greenhouse gas emissions, particularly from wood energy, in different ways. And we want to make a user-friendly platform and enable third-party and public use of the model so that folks from the community, the RTA community in other states can make use of this as well. We do really also look for this model to then provide input to a regional economic impact model, be it sort of in-plan, most likely, or REMI. We currently have work going on in that area with a professor at UMass here, but we want to make it a bit more of a method to take the output of this model to prepare the input that would be necessary for in-plan, for example, to then be able to extend this analysis for regional planners to look at the local economic impacts in terms of jobs and income, regional product, and so forth from these different renewable thermal potential futures. I believe it was on an RTA webinar not too long ago. There was a presentation on the NREL electrification future studies. It provided a lot of really information, data, and scenarios that applied very much to what we were looking at in this model. So I did want to really dig into that study and keep track of that, reach out to those researchers, and integrate the data and assumptions as appropriate from that work. And then we want to apply the model as test cases or for real cases in collaboration with RTA to some of the memberships and states that would be interested. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Hele and take any questions if we have time, and look forward to working together.
Thank you, Duane. We have time for a few questions, so feel free to jump on, unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay, we could also save it for the end if you're coming up with something during the rest of the presentation. Nikhil Natkani and Megan Shaw are the next ones. I'm going to present Cambridge Clean Heating and Cooling Market Platform. Take it away.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Nikhil Nadkarni. I'm an energy planner with the City of Cambridge, and I'm joined by Megan Shaw, Director of Outreach for Cambridge Energy Alliance, as well as by John Gingrich, who's a Senior Vice President at Energy Sage. So thanks so much to Hele and the team at Yale for making this opportunity possible, and thanks to all of you for joining. All right, let me just jump. Okay. So a little bit of background here. So the Cambridge community has long been committed to taking action on climate change. And in June 2015, we adopted our net zero action plan with a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions from buildings by mid-century. So the focus of this plan, which has a number of actions and strategies for the building sector, focuses on energy efficiency with the remaining energy use delivered by renewable energy. And identifying low carbon energy supply is a big part of this plan, especially as on-site fuel use, so primarily gas and some oil, is about 56% of our energy use. So a couple of years ago, we started and recently wrapped up the low carbon energy supply strategy. So this looked at buildings in Cambridge and really kind of mapped out that future of how do buildings get to a low carbon energy supply. And for most buildings, we expect that electrification or on-site renewable is really going to be the key for getting off of fossil fuel combustion. For some of our campuses and some of our commercial cores, district energy is a possibility or is really the best path forward. but for most buildings, it's going to be individual electrification that's the key strategy. So we had the opportunity about 2 years ago to have a summer fellow focus on some of this work and identifying early opportunities for renewable thermal. Some of his work included looking at the technologies and benefits for Cambridge homes, looking at the types of heat pump technologies that would be most relevant to the building stock here, and some of the benefits. So comfort and cooling is a big part of this. You know, a lot of buildings in Cambridge have older heating systems, and far more buildings here lack central AC. And especially as we have warmer and warmer summers, comfort and cooling and human health will be an important benefit of air source heat pumps. We'll also see greenhouse gas savings from a transition to mini splits and to air source heat pumps. So even with the current grid mix, you know, as we heard from some of our other presenters, air source heat pumps are a far cleaner option than oil or natural gas heating systems. And then for some buildings, we'll see cost savings. So, you know, given current natural gas prices, the competitiveness of air source heat pumps is on the heating side is sometimes difficult to ascertain, but on the cooling side, we do understand that a lot of window AC cooled homes waste a tremendous amount of electricity and therefore money on, you know, sort of inefficient cooling systems, and a transition to mini split cooling can provide an opportunity for savings on the cooling side. So our fellow also had a chance to look at our property database to analyze building stock for priority targets by looking at some of those things like home characteristics, but also building ownership. And through that, he was able to identify sort of high priority homes that would really be likely adopters for mini splits. We've also been an observer to the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance work in the region. So some of those Heat Smart campaigns, particularly in Somerville next door, as well as Portland, Maine, and Northampton, we've had a chance to learn from some of the lessons for a very similar building stock and, you know, similar types of challenges. And I should mention that we also, kind of separately from renewable thermal, we have a efficiency program for multifamily buildings. And you know, this is where a technical advisor is working with apartment and condo buildings here to help them take advantage of opportunities for solar and for energy efficiency. And we've been able to learn from some of those buildings what just kind of theoretically, you know, how could those buildings electrify in the future? So, you know, so far we've had a chance to really kind of just get a broad sense of some of the opportunities for renewable thermal here. But so what are some of the challenges? So of course there's timing. We need to be able to provide a solution for homeowners when they're ready to replace their old system. You know, we could present this great technology, and we could hear from a lot of homeowners that you know, they still think they have 4 or 5 years before they replace their heating system. And at the same time, the sort of flip side of that coin is that we understand from our research that about, you know, 75 to 80% of heating systems are replaced, at least in the residential sector, are replaced on an emergency basis when, you know, the boiler fails in the middle of the night, kind of thing. Second, there's also lack of awareness about heat pumps and sort of what these things do. I think, you know, people have heard of them, but they aren't really sure about the costs, about how they're installed, that, you know, whether or not they offer cooling and heating. We also have a lot of drafty older housing stock in Cambridge, which can present a challenge sometimes for really any sort of heating upgrade. Fourth, you know, as I mentioned, gas is cheap, but we could still see savings on the cooling side. And fifth, we do actually just kind of, in a background way, receive inquiries from residents who are interested in learning more about heat pumps or thinking about getting them. And one of the questions that we get pretty often is how do we find qualified installers, and how do we compare options? And the last sort of challenge that we see is we have a high percentage of multifamily renter-occupied buildings. So we wanted to look to the success of our Sunny Cambridge campaign for lessons on how we might be able to support renewable thermal here. So Sunny Cambridge was a successful campaign that we started in 2016, and the platform is still running today. It's still, you know, part of our offering. And basically, it's we worked with Energy Sage to help residents connect with a marketplace of installers. And the results of the campaign and platform to date have been nearly 500 kilowatts installed. So there's just one of the screenshots on the right of the platform, but basically you can see that the Energy Sage marketplace allows homeowners to compare quotes from different solar installers. There's a profile of each of them, their reviews, so homeowners can get a sense of each installer's experience. And then if they have further questions, they can contact Energy Sage through email or phone to help them compare quotes and understand some of the technical differences. So the question that came up for us was, could a similar approach work for mini split heat pumps and solar hot water? So to provide you a bit of a project overview of the clean heating and cooling marketplace, our goals are to help Cambridge residents learn about air source heat pumps and solar hot water, to help them connect with qualified installers, and then to help them compare their options. We focused on these two key technologies. As looking at our building stock, we felt that these were the most relevant to help homes here. And to date, we've worked with Energy Sage, and they've interviewed installers to just sort of collect some educational material and learn about the different technologies out there. So I'm going to provide an overview of some of the key project components here. So first, as I mentioned, is education and information. And we want to help residents understand which technologies might be best for their home. We want to share how these technologies work and communicate typical costs and benefits. So there would be sort of an educational component to the platform where people would arrive first so that they can really get basic questions answered. Second, they'd be able to then use the platform to connect with installers. So Energy Sage is engaging local installers for both technologies. We're also going to be looping in Mass Clean Energy Center, as they've done a lot of engagement in this space. We'll then be creating program rules and agreements to ensure that the installers are responsive to customers that come into the platform. And we'll also make sure their installer profiles and reviews for customers. So for customers, they'll be entering their information into an intake form when they're ready to learn, to get a quote or to learn more. And that'll be shared with installers who will reach out to the customer and schedule a visit. And finally, when it's time for comparing options, the Energy Sage Clean Heating and Cooling Marketplace platform is going to offer a quote comparison tool. We're thinking this is sort of a spreadsheet-based tool where you can see the different technologies and sort of compare, the key differences between different quotes. Similar to Sunny Cambridge, an Energy Sage staff person will be ready to help you compare quotes and answer any questions you have. So we're hoping to launch this by early summer. And once the platform is ready for the public, we're going to be conducting a outreach campaign around the launch of it. So here at Cambridge, many years ago, we created the Cambridge Energy Alliance initiative as a way of conducting community-based outreach around energy efficiency and renewable energy. So I want to build on some of that experience for this campaign. We'll be doing mailings to some of those high priority homes. We'll be using social media, both paid and unpaid. We'll be working with some of our nonprofit partners in the community, as well as emailing target neighborhoods. And then we hope to host one or two community workshops. In the upper right, you can see one of the Sunny Cambridge workshops we held, where people just wanted to come and ask questions about whether solar made sense for their home. And we think this will be a great way of connecting people with the platform. And finally, drafty homes are of course a challenge to installing heat pumps, and we want to make sure people also have resources for weatherization. So we hope to be able to connect people to getting their homes insulated at the same time or soon after their heat pump installation. So just thinking back to some of those challenges I mentioned earlier, our goals are to tackle many of them, but of course we can't address all of them. But we want to be able to share information with residents about renewable heating and cooling to help them connect with installers. And part of that is allowing them to either pursue sort of a proactive replacement if they're ready to do that now, but also to have a platform in place when they need to fix an ailing heating system, whether that's 6 months from now or a year from now. We hope that we'll be able to identify cost savings that residents recognize in heating and cooling. And for us, I think this is also an opportunity to learn about the barriers and challenges people encounter. Of course, we expect there will be, a decent number of people who visit the platform, who come to a workshop. Maybe a smaller percentage of that go ahead with getting quotes, and a certain percentages that go ahead with an installation. So just as valuable as learning about the barriers or the issues that the remaining people ran into. And looking ahead, I think it's important for us to understand which residents here were able to participate, whether it's an income thing, whether it's a home ownership structure, whether it's a specific type of building that allowed them to participate. And from this program, we hope to understand how we can really scale up renewable heating and cooling in a way that many more residents in Cambridge are able to benefit. So thanks so much, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nikhil. Any questions for Nikhil? So I have one. Do you have any thoughts on how this marketplace can scale from Cambridge to the region? How easy would that be?
Yeah, sure. I think it's an approach that certainly could work in other communities. Of course, I think as we engage installers here, that would need to be a parallel effort in another community to get local installers on board.
Okay, thank you. And while Matt is presenting OTherm, I thought that all speakers could think through whether there is something that the RTA community could contribute, or how can your project benefit from the RTA community. Just, if we have time at the end, we'll just do some discussion on that. Matt, are you ready?
I think so. Can you see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. Good morning, everyone. So the project, this OTherm project, is something that has, let's see if I can advance my slides. Let me try something else. There we go. This is something that's been emerging from discussions in the RTA for the past couple of years, the need for a consistent data dictionary, some open performance data. And in late 2017, there was an opportunity through the DOE, through the State Energy Program Office, and a group in the RTA put together a proposal. We were expected to be notified in April with the start date in July. We actually got notified in September, and we're still in negotiation with DOE, but expect to be starting up in January or February of 2019. So this RTA grant is kind of a bridge to keep the discussion going, get the project going, and stay on track, even though we've had these delays in the timeline with the DOE. There were also some challenges that kind of became more apparent as we were writing the grant that we didn't really have the resources to do. So this innovation grant kind of acts as a supplement to get going early, and also to enhance some of the things that needed to be done. Over the next 2 years, we do expect that we'll successfully negotiate the award with DOE, and then we will be running that project over the next 2 years and hope to launch in January of 2021. So thanks to the supporters who provided letters of support for the DOE application, and we're going to be coming back to you to serve, to continue in working with us on this project, and perhaps an advisory board capacity. I've highlighted the Sunspec Alliance. That's the entity that developed OSPARK, which is what we're modeling our effort after. It's been very important in the solar PV industry for that performance data to be available, and it has really helped to unlock some private capital and facilitate the financing of projects. And we're hoping that, that this project will have a similar effect on renewable thermal technologies. So the overall vision, it differs from solar. Solar is in some respects a little bit simpler in that you can meter everything right at the panel. It doesn't really involve the building. It doesn't really involve the usage or the homeowner. Renewable thermal technologies are a little bit more difficult, and the way data is collected is different. And what we're counting on is a growing number of these web-based monitoring systems that will be collecting data from these heat pumps and centralizing that to primarily serve their own customer base. And so we are hoping that we can work with these providers to access some of the data elements so that we can have this common data set of performance that we think will help grow the market. So this would be interval data on the heat pump operation, on the entering water temperatures and so on, that would then be in the context of the building, the location, what are the monitoring system specifications in terms of the accuracy, how are things being measured. So there's a lot of context that we need to provide in order to interpret this data. And then with that organized properly, that could then be provided to these end users. And so we've suggested state energy offices would be interested in this, utilities, private analytics companies. This is similar to how OSPARC has been used in the solar PV space. So to pull this off, there's a number of challenges. One of them is that we need a data model that is well thought out and has some capacity to both take on all that has been learned and also have some capacity to grow. And there's this project that has been developed and maintained by the NREL and the Home Performance Coalition. It's called HPXML. The XML stands for this extensible markup language, which is a data exchange protocol. And the HP stands for home performance. So this is a data schema that has been developed to look at home performance largely around the energy system of a home. And currently there are 4 special use cases, and we propose to add more that would be related to renewable thermal. And each renewable thermal technology will probably end up having its own use case. There will be some similarities, but also there will be some unique elements. So this HPXML is something we need to get our hands around, and it has essentially these 6 different elements about the customer, the contractor, the building, the project, utility, and consumption. And it's fairly massive. This is a sort of a schematic of some of the elements that have been extracted and put together, and you have these different branches that expand, and there's a lot of details in this. This gets down into individual lighting technologies and a lot of stuff that we may not need, but actually there's a lot of stuff in here that I think we will need. And if we just look at kind of the building part of this, there's a lot of things that need to be worked out here. So one of the challenges in this project is, how do we manage collaboration? How do we manage a discussion around something that is this complex, where each element is, needs some level of discussion. And so what we're doing is we're building a tool that will help us manage that collaboration. So the schema itself has about 1,300 data elements. I would envision that the renewable thermal technology use cases will likely have several hundred. And so the RTA Innovation Grant is largely being used to develop this tool that will enable us to work collaboratively on this schema so that we have it properly structured, we have it properly documented, and that it's accepted by the community. And then we would then propose that as a new use case to the HP XML working group, which I've recently become a member of. Some of the images on the right are kind of some of the examples of some of the data elements that are in the HP XML. So we will need to go through and think about whether we want these to be required, whether we want them to be optional, or whether we don't care about them at all. When you look at the one on the lower right, you'll notice that the heat pump type, it's kind of assumed in this case that it appears to be assumed to be an air source heat pump because it gives the heating capacity specifications at 47 degrees Fahrenheit and 17 degrees Fahrenheit, which are not the typical ratings for a geothermal heat pump. And then you see the geothermal loop data element, and we'll be able with our tool to click on that plus sign and expand it out and look in more detail at what that is, and also then be able to comment on it. So this is currently under development. We expect it to be live in January or early February. And so those participating in this collaborative development of these data models, which we hope will be a number of those in the RTA, will be able to log in and dynamically explore the data model and then click on an element and provide a comment. So circled there, it says the admin has just now added a comment saying that this is important. So we will be able to then catalog and track the discussion of each data element. And I think we'll be able to efficiently work through this, and we can explore different branches and then kind of close those out and then move on to another branch. So once this is complete, I'll be sending out some invitations. People can get on and explore it and see if it's something that you're interested in contributing to. But I think that this is going to be very helpful to be able to manage our way through this complex schema. And we do need this complexity of the schema is an asset, but it also is a challenge. So as we get this going, and the OTHERM project, again, involves a number of entities. It's through NYSERDA. Yale is involved, UNH is involved, as is Oak Ridge National Lab. And we have a number of stakeholders that are the RTA members. And then we have some other projects that we are working with, the HP XML working group. I'm involved with the Heat Pump Center Annex 52, and they have another annex coming up looking at the IoT of heat pumps, which I think will be very much relevant to the OTHERM project. The Canadian Geo-Exchange Coalition is very interested. They've done a lot of work already, identifying data elements, identifying what's realistic, what's important. So we'll be relying on them quite a bit for their expertise. The overall timeline for the DOE project is it's a 2-year project, roughly aligning with calendar years 2019 and 2020. And as we go through and develop these data models, there will be a need to then also be able to move data from different places, be able to upload data for that have the building information. And so this is all worked out. This is a much longer webinar to go through all of this. So this innovation grant is being used largely developed as a visualization tool to initiate this collaboration and begin to get this work done on the data schema. we see that there's some things that will need to be done. So when we do a facility setup, we'll probably try to do that as a spreadsheet upload. Hopefully be able to have some export functions out of some design software that will export a lot of that information and then be able to read that directly into the OTherm database. When we talk about open data, there are some aspects of this that are going to be open. There are some aspects that are going to be require user permission and user login. And we're going to work with the Sunspec Alliance on some of their experience in this. But when we talk about open, we use a lowercase o because there are elements that will be open, but there's also elements that are going to be secure. And in general, an entity that puts data into OTherm will have full access to all of the data that they put in. And then they will be able to compare their sites with anonymized metrics from other sites. So we think that will be an incentive for entities to participate. We'll be looking at issues of data use, data security, data privacy, and there's a lot of work being done in those areas. So, over the next few years, we have our work cut out for us to work through these issues, but optimistic that we're going to get this off to a good start. As has been discussed a little bit, we want this to be a broadly applicable approach. So we're developing it right now for ground source heat pumps, but we want this also to be applicable to air source heat pumps, to biomass, to solar thermal, and all these other technologies as well. So I will leave it there and open up for questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt on OTherm? So there will be later opportunities to ask questions too. I guess you could contact directly, or we could also have that on Basecamp. And Matt was clear on what he wanted, what he would see as a beneficial contribution from the RTA network, helping to test the OTherm data clearinghouse along the way. I don't know, Val, do you see any? So where could the RTA network bring value to the carbon cost calculator? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, and not just on the cost carbon calculator, but as I mentioned earlier, and as folks heard, we work regionally with state agencies, so it'd be great to hear from folks in the field what other tools or products would be helpful on a regional basis. But from everything I've heard from the presentations and what I know of the RTA Alliance, there's so much expertise here. And for the cost carbon calculator in particular, it would be good to hear about experiences with performance characteristics or other data, how this tool could be most useful in the hands of installer and things like that. We are, like I said, we are going to be working with at least one, probably several consultants to develop this tool. And in particular, we applied for this grant with the UMass Clean Energy Extension team, and you heard from Duane. So we're going to be getting a lot of expertise from there. So we are already tied in with the Alliance, and it's a terrific resource.
Duane, do you want to supplement and add from your perspective?
Sure. Thank you, Helly. And yeah, for sure. I should also mention that in our award, we do have partners, which include 2 regional planning agencies in Massachusetts, in Berkshire Regional Planning Commission and the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And we also do have the Mass Clean Energy Center as a partner. And the purpose there is to really provide some use cases for us with regard to using this planning model through a heat tally and looking at projecting renewable thermal futures. For the RTA and the membership of the RTA, we are eager to hear both in terms of how this model could potentially be used and how we could extend it to be most useful to energy offices and to regional planners. And at the end of the day, we'd also, as the model gets further along and developed, we'd like to have a couple use cases. We can certainly apply those to Massachusetts, but to the extent that other states are interested as well, we're eager to hear from them and work out case studies for them as well.
Thank you, Duane. What about you, Nikhil?
Well, yes, in terms of
How the
collaboration.
could the RTA network bring any value to your project?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, when we were developing this project, I think we certainly thought about ways of presenting sort of what sort of information residents would benefit from, and is it a more accurate, you know, calculator? Is it connecting with installers? Is all, you know, all of the above? And so we're working on the installer piece, but I think learning from everyone else about, you know, sort of presenting cost estimates, presenting benefit estimates more accurately is certainly going to be helpful to us. And you know, if for the network as a whole, I mean, I think I'm also really curious to learn as we go into outreach, sort of what messaging would really benefit in getting the word out there and getting people interested.
Well, thank you. I guess we're at the end of the meeting, and I want to thank Val, Duane, Nikhil, and Matt for their project initiative and presentation. And I'm looking forward to seeing where these projects are going and hear back from them at a later point of time. I would also like to mention that our next web meeting is on January 16th, where we will have 3 states presenting market strategies for renewable heating and cooling. So feel free to register for that web meeting as well. Should be interesting. Okay, well then I would like to thank everyone for participating and have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thanks, Helle. Best of luck to everyone with your projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.